Hello and welcome back once again to my lair. I am joined by Mango, and I am your host, the Rambling Lich. And today I would like to talk to you about cults. What are they? Why they're formed? Who benefits? And what makes them interesting? And I think to start with this, we should talk about what is a cult. Often they're formed around a single individual or group that gains power from various sources. Sometimes it's militant. Others you would be looking at various religious powers. But these are never mainstream, or at least extremely rarely are they mainstream. You would be looking at maybe a heretical branch of a more mainstream religion, or maybe an underground social club viewed amongst the nobility, or even a kind of group help club amongst the more common folk. A little bit of scratch my back, I scratch yours. A little bit of pray to this deity, and your shop will receive these particular shoppers and guests much more regularly, if not guaranteed. And that is sometimes just benefits for gaining numbers or getting the masses in. And in settings such as Golarion, there is actual power within the cults. Enough people praying to the correct god, that god looks at them and starts granting boons, wishes, simply helping and reaping the rewards of their worship. That is another key point in the cult. There is a genuine benefit to joining. So that kind of covers what it is and why people will join it. So how does a cult form? Well, there are various methods. It could be as simple as a herald of whatever outside entity meets up with one of the nobles and goes, "Hey, I'm going to give you secrets on all of your rivals, their businesses, what they're working on, who they're trying to marry off into what family. In return, you are going to gather your friends around them, turn them to my worship, and slowly grow your power in my name." This happening over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you suddenly have a very powerful noble family that has entrenched itself in the cult of, let's just say, Asmodeus. And this family now has control over several of the whatever would count in this region as your judges or those who would write laws, creating ever greater tithe and taxes, crueler punishments and penalties on those who've broken laws, until you now have a tyranny. Until you have a tyranny cruelly oppressing the lower classes. It doesn't necessarily have to be such a destructive or oppressive cult, but cult leaders like power, and so you will find that more darker deities and creatures with deity-like power are going to be drawn to just giving their cult leaders and followers power for that sake. It also means that it's easier to punish these individuals when they don't follow what the entity wants. Say the next heir to this noble family sees everything his father has done, decides he does not approve, and so instead of following in his father's footsteps, has decided he is going to follow a different deity and attempt to reform everything his father has done. Well, a cult of Asmodeus would simply kill this usurper in their eyes, and damn the consequences, it wouldn't matter. It could be that noble's only heir, but he was going to go against everything that was being built over the last several years. And that is the price one would pay. Eventually, the cult overtakes everything in the leader and the members' eyes, and will often inspire fanaticism. Oddly enough, that fanaticism is one of the easier ways to spot them. Groups that have very close-knit friendships and become more insular. They might still do business with outsiders, although you might end up paying a premium to do business with them. Or their cult might actually be one that appreciates such commerce. And so the way of displaying your power is through how much business you can do. That is another line that a cult might take.
In the case of some more brazen cults, you may even see them out in public wearing something that could be considered a uniform.
Uniforms, rings, subtle nods to their membership are often visible in the more secretive cults. More bombastic ones might have tattoos or hairstyles, symbols carved on buildings even. They may have a statue to whatever entity that they worship carved as gargoyles on their buildings or in their courtyards. It's very much depends on how generally accepted their cult is, as well as how ambitious they are. And you can also generally assume that any particular deity within a pantheon has a cult devoted to them, although not every cult will be devoted to a deity per se. And on to how you might take out or dismantle a cult. More than likely, unless it is a very small and regional cult, you are not going to be able to dismantle the cult as a whole. Maybe the cell might be able to be dismantled. In the case of the larger, more organized cults, it's nearly impossible. You are not going to take out the cult of Asmodeus without taking on the entire nation of Chiliacs. In the same way that some cults will be stamped out over and over again, only to rise the next time somebody finds the guy's manifesto. It is simply the way of things with it. And others are much more almost sanctioned. Not every cult needs to be a negative thing. And I think that is one of the things to keep track on. Obviously, dismantling and interrupting an evil cult can give you some good favor with whatever town or settlement you're dealing with. It might also completely ruin that relationship depending on who all was involved in that cult. It could destroy the town itself, in which case very little of it might have benefited you. It really just depends. But disgracing the leader, turning the lower members away from the cult could work as a very slow method of dismantling their power base, although it would be slow in terms of a larger cult. Your best method is disgracing a leader or dealing with them in a legal manner, shedding light on shady business deals or odd practices. If they do engage in more extreme forms of sacrifice that would not be tolerated within the city or town that you're in. Stuff that just can't be ignored. Of course, you also run the risk of angering whatever outside deity or patron supports that cult, which definitely makes things more difficult. Good example of a consequence of dealing with a cult: interrupting the activities of the cult of Tashalas could end up with your drinking water just becoming poison every time you take a drink. So unless you have a way of either making yourself immune or potentially neutralizing said poison, you aren't going to last very long under that curse. And that can be expanded even farther. Kicking the cult out explicitly from a city, town, or even whole country could result in that deity turning all potable water into poisoned wells for a month, in which case you are not going to survive, period. And that is part of what makes dealing with or dismantling cults so difficult in these worlds. Their patrons have power, and it is not wise to offend such powers without taking precautions. But on to some examples of cults. And I would like to start with the cult of the Redeemer Queen. This cult had the goal of changing the nature of a demon lord, specifically Nocticula, the succubus demon lord, and changing her from a ruler of succubi who dwelled within a realm of hedonism, depravity, and general destructive celebration. Drugs, slavery, sex, power, all wrapped up into one. Her cult saw something that could change. And note, this is a heretical offshoot of her original cult, which promoted everything that she was originally doing. And so, as the cult gained power and influence, the very nature of Nocticula would change. She would eventually ascend to become a deity of artists, midnight, and outcasts. Those who want to reform from evil, depending on how deep they go. You can find a lot of this story in the game Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous or in the module by the same name. But as far as cults go, this one was generally positive and was instrumental in closing up the world wound on Golarion. And proof that no matter how deep into evil something can sink, they might be able to crawl their way out of that hole and become something better than what they are. Would you like to tell us about the Red Mantis, Mango?
A cult that has offered very little benefit to anyone who doesn't want someone dead. The cult of the Red Mantis, dedicated to the deity of assassins at Chakik, are exactly that. A cult of trained assassins. They're an example of a cult that is seen wearing a uniform, distinguished by their red and black leather armor and masks shaped like the face of a mantis. They are easily identifiable by the sawtooth blades that they all carry.
They are a trained organization, so you are unlikely to find undisciplined members. Yes, their coin is violence, and they are not the most discerning of takers whenever it comes to what contracts they will and won't take. But they rarely will kill for no reason. They do enjoy killing. Some enjoy it for a professional reason. Some might enjoy it for simply the sake of killing. But in the end, they are a organization that is paid to do a job. And so you're not going to find idealist zealots amongst them. You will find zealots, and they are all, by nature of the organization, worshippers of a assassin god. So there is that.
So devoted to assassination are they that clients who want other things from them included with the assassination, such as espionage, will have the entire contract refused. They are not interested in anything but the killing. They are very dedicated and persistent killers as well. Once they've killed the living flesh of a target, they will be certain to make sure that that target will not be coming back through means magical and mundane, and if it so happens that someone is resurrected, they will track them back down and kill them again.
Moving on, the Whispering Way is a quintessential undeath cult. Cruel, secretive. Many of their members' entire goals revolve around achieving undeath in various forms. They could be hangers-on of vampires who wish to eventually become chosen to become vampires themselves. They could be a mage who has secreted himself somewhere outside of a city who is planning to go lich. It can also include various members of the undead themselves, ghouls, ghasts, so on and so forth. They are a very insular group within the setting. The most powerful member of this cult was Tar-Baphon, a lich who stylized himself as the Whispering Tyrant, with the vision of turning the nation of Ustalav into an undead utopia. He would invade neighboring countries and eventually made so much of a nuisance of himself that he ended up sealed away for an ungodly amount of time. But as liches are to do, he would rebuild himself, return, and once again make nuisances of himself fairly regularly. But that is just the most powerful member of this cult. Any of the undead might be considered part of this, or those looking to raise themselves to undeath. Necromancy is also heavily encouraged within the cult, and they are also a cult that is very, very frowned upon in most good and respectable countries. Although they are still strong enough that when it comes to regional or any other matters, they might find a seat at the table, whether it is known or unknown that they have that seat. Would you like to introduce us to our final cult?
Led by a Leng ghoul named Mother Jackal, who burrowed her way from Leng to Absalom centuries ago, the Eaters of Knowledge are a cult dedicated to Yog-Sothoth, the outer god of gates, space, and time. The cult that is the Eaters of Knowledge is not your traditional organized religion. Mother Jackal uses her pull in the house of Ankamen of Absalom and their power over the judiciary to free convicted people of arcane inclination, wizards, alchemists, and the likes, as well as occasionally getting corpses sent to her so that she can put them somewhere and allow them to ripen. Yog-Sothoth himself is considered to be a self-aware manifestation of the dimension of time, or possibly even the Dark Tapestry itself. The Dark Tapestry being the darkness between the stars where the inhabitants of Golarion believe true madness lies. Yog-Sothoth's followers follow him in the hopes of being revealed eldritch secrets and hoping that he will reveal them to him in exchange for their worship. His followers believe that he is preparing to awaken the Great Old Ones on various planets, and the inhabitants of those planets will be wiped out to make way for them.
Death cults such as this are often some of the most extreme cults found in Galarian, and if uncovered should be stamped out as best as can be done. But what about when the player characters make a cult? Well, it's not exactly hard to see how it might happen. A character comes through a town, saves it. Suddenly they're getting a nice bit of hero worship, and they take it that extra step farther. Start asking for gifts, start giving gifts, and buying their way into political power within the city or the town itself, depending on how much magic they can perform, or fake, depending on what their abilities are. They may be able to either convince the locals that yes, they are actually that good and do speak for an outer power that can grant the local populace better harvests, more commerce, nicer weather. These are all well within the abilities of stronger, higher level parties. And the fact that more haven't made cults around them is, frankly, surprising. It also becomes a great way for a given party to get resources or hard to acquire ingredients to their own storehouses. Sure, maybe they pay a little bit towards the town in question that harvests. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just part of their own gifts. Hey, you saved us from that dragon several years ago, and now every year this town just sends a gift to the player characters or the party or whatever of whatever rare resource they harvest there. Maybe the party cleric sets up the infrastructure for their church to arise within this town. It's something to keep in mind that your players might very well end up trying to do. And depending on how well they help the town, you should let them. And I think that is it for kind of the vibes on this talk about cults and the various benefits, drawbacks, and damage they can do. I do hope that you enjoyed this conversation, and if you did, talk in the comments about what your players did with cults, how they took them out, how they formed them. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, a subscribe, and join us again for the next one. Goodbye.
What a ridiculous cult. I love them.